it's afternoon now, isn't it? So afternoon, everybody. We've got everyone here. I think we should make a start. Given that we've got quite a short slot, haven't we? Half an hour. So I'm just going to make a start, if that's okay. So good afternoon, all. My name's Alex Jones. I work for a company called Rapid DCS, and we have a product called Sterling, which I think is going to interest any of those of you who are interested in how we calculate carbon throughout the life cycle of an asset. So I'm going to walk you through a bit of that over the next 15 minutes. It's worth noting at the front end how proud Rapid is to be a founding partner of the Zero Group, and we're watching with great interest how the network is growing, how quickly it's growing. But very proud to have sponsored Early Doors. It's clear we've got a common agenda about reducing upfront carbon and meeting the challenge of some net zero carbon goals within our construction or built environment industry. So I'm here for the next sort of 15 minutes to outline the problem that I think we are meeting, our vision in doing so, and spend a bit of time, most of the time I hope, looking at the solution itself. And then at the end of it, we should have another 15 minutes worth for Q&A, and I look forward to that. So if we went back to back end of last year, I think we were fresh out of COP26, where there were some further developments and further goals set. It's clear on the minds of governments globally that there's a need to act. We've also been recently to conferences like Future Build. We've been at Project Controls Expo last year, and carbon is very much on the agenda everywhere. I guess you folk would know that, otherwise you wouldn't be here, but it is everywhere. And there's a reason for that. Some of the stats that were coming out around the industry would suggest that it's about 40% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions actually come from our construction sector. And if we were to break that down a little bit further still, I think you'd find that a good quarter to a third of that actually comes from the embodied carbon itself, and that unfortunately is growing. So there's a need to do something in that space, but it's not just about let's find greener materials. Actually, if we look at PAS 2080, the specification that helps us calculate it and be consistent in the way that we define carbon in the industry, it's broken it down helpfully into different stages, and I've outlined those here. Quite a lot of the tools that we're seeing on the market that are giving you high-level carbon assessments are focusing on A1, looking at the material itself. But we believe that the conversation and the reality is a little bit more complicated than that. If I outline this section here, it really matters that what happens with the transportation of materials. Let's say we bought some steel from China and we found that it was greener steel that we could create in the UK. But by the time we shipped it halfway around the world, by the time we post-processed it, by the time that we transported it around site as well, and it all matters. The methodology and the transportation plan, the logistics all matter if you are to demonstrate genuinely with a straight face that your school, prison, hospital that you're building is genuinely not just the cheapest, but the greenest. We think that's quite a complicated calculation to do. It is if you're managing it in Excel, and there are lots of people around the country building their Excel sheets today. So, and we've seen some really cool ones, believe me, but this is only going to get more complicated. And there are huge projects out there today that you just can't manage it. It becomes unwieldy, and we think this process needs systemizing. So that's what we've done with Sterling, is to try and meet that problem. We want to help the industry to calculate its net zero carbon footprint. Sorry, its carbon footprint as it goes on a glide path toward net zero. Our vision is to be the world's leading estimating platform for doing so, and our mission is really to accelerate and support the ambitions toward net zero carbon by making it as easy as possible. So if I were to put that into three things, I'd say that we need to help the industry to adapt. We want to help the industry be accountable and transparent with its data. That means, for the first time, you'll be able to prove and improve your carbon footprint rather than take it from cost planning or benchmark numbers. Let's genuinely get into the detail. As most of you will know, the devil is in the detail when it comes to carbon. And then finally, we want to make it secure, easy, and as best integrated as possible so it forms part of your business as usual and works well with your other software ecosystem within your company. This is a journey that we started just a few years ago, but we saw this coming with expertise in cost planning and BIM, and we saw how collating the data there within a 5D environment, 4D and 5D, you could see the power of that data within models and the way that we were designing and getting quantities. And this was really smart. But when the carbon challenge came in and the asset management challenge came in, you can see how those that have control of the data around a cost plan can apply it to other verticals within the digital construction space. So we saw an opportunity there, and we've been developing since, from a concept back in 2018 to launching at the back of last year. We've already taken on board our first customers, and pleased to say we've got an ambitious growth plan now as we target things like project controls, not just estimating. So yes, we are a estimating platform, but we're also a carbon calculation platform. We are not a carbon platform with a bit of estimating, nor are we an estimating platform with a bit of a nod to carbon. We are world class in both, and that's the reputation we want to uphold. What you're going to see is the fact that we have real flexible structures in a modern takeoff tool with smart takeoff platforms from 2D and 3D markup. We'll have a whole bunch of intelligent libraries for you to use, customizing your views, allowing John and Jenny to work on the same estimate at the same time with our multi-user platform. And as we said, it will be a truly integrated open source solution as well. So it's a modern, secure, world-class platform. Like I say, so Rapid is the company. We're a digital consultancy practice. But we spent some time implementing the incumbent systems that are in the market today, and we found some of the gaps and problems there, and we thought rather than fixing these with platforms that are over 30 years old, we'll develop our own. So Sterling represents the first new estimating platform to come to the market in the last 30 years. Let's dive straight into the platform, if that's okay. I think it's always useful to see the platform in use. So Sterling is a SaaS-based platform, so it's in the cloud, and you can open up Sterling in any number of different different platforms like Google or in Safari and others. So it's completely open in that way. We've got secure access, so you can manage your logons by different people. Certain people can see and do different things. And as you enter the platform, you'll be able to see your portfolio of different projects and search for those. Look at those in different view, maybe in tile format or in a list view. And then we have a cost plan that we're starting to develop. What you'll notice in this cost plan instantly is it's not just about cost, but in here we also have the carbon rates. So for each line item we have in cost terms, we're also calculating carbon. And that's the real USP. It's not that Dave is doing an estimate in Manchester and Jenny is doing some different carbon assessment in London, and the two kind of don't talk to each other. This is completely back to back. So if you're going to change out the type of cladding, you will see a difference in cost and carbon instantly. You'll see down the bottom here, we've also broken this line item into its resources and looked at carbon in a way that PAS 2080 would demand. You can see their reference to A1 to 3, A4, A5. Those calculations are happening in the background all the time. We be really useful for estimators. They often say to us that they will conduct a cost plan in one way, but they want to restructure it and share it with their client or with their leadership team in a different way. So we've introduced this concept from the very outset that we'll be able to pivot data around depending on which work breakdown structure you want to use. For those of you who aren't estimators, that might not be very exciting, but we think that's pretty unique out there. But all the time, we've got really powerful data in here that is nice and clean, but you can pivot it in any which way you like in a whole host of different reporting standards. Makes it a genuinely smart platform. So here's an example of where we would take cost line items on the left and we would map them over to a structure. You could create your own structure for your own business or for your own leadership team or for your own client. Then we'll look at our resources. We have a whole host of libraries in the background. That's where our intelligence lies. And that would include a whole different bunch of unit rates based here on labour libraries, plant libraries, materials and subcontractor libraries. We can help you developing these, but also we could help you to maintain them and grow them over time. Or if you have a database full of data already, then why not just migrate it over, and we can assist with that. You can see the link, can't you? The devil is in the detail, but we've got whole libraries for different timbers and sands and concretes and steels, and that will only ever grow. Those rates are in the background, so you'll be able to swap one item in and out and be able to see instantly what the what-if scenario looks like. I've put the price up 1%, but I've got a whole lot greener. And that's the balancing act today for new engineers, new project teams in the construction sector, isn't it? Anyone can build a building, but to build it cheaper and greener than anyone else, that's where the battleground is. I mentioned earlier about takeoff, so we've got a powerful 3D viewer in here as well. So I've also, if you look further down that screen, you'll see that I've brought in 2D models as well, so drawings. Let me take you into one of those now. I can spin this viewer around. I can identify individual elements, but I could search for those too in this takeoff object screen down here. So I can search for all of my concrete columns of a certain size. I could use the parameters. This is really powerful. I could use that to say, show me columns with this grade of concrete in, and it's going to search all of that. When I've found those, I can drag them over into what we call takeoff items, and those will be what is used by the estimator typically in building up their price. Here's another example where we've kind of exploded the diagram and we've searched by walls. But I think it's useful. Here's a use case I like to think of. How many doors are there in the building? How many are fire rated? Show me which ones have a fire rating of 1 hour on the 3rd floor. This is absolutely instant to be able to do these kind of calculations and drag those across into your cost plan. So it's really intelligent like that. We think this is genuinely world class. And once you've done that, you've built up your takeoff. You've got your takeoff item, that quantity that's linked back to your 2D drawing or your 3D model, and that is driving the rates. That's driving the quantity within the cost plan, and then multiplied by your unit rate for cost and for carbon is giving you your overall totals. I mentioned that we had ambitions to grow this platform. So yes, we've started out with a product that is capable of doing our estimating and model takeoff today for both cost and capital carbon. Our plan is to grow that significantly in the areas of risk and change management, for subcontractor assessments, so a tender portal, and for managing work packages. Beyond that, this is the estimate. Perhaps we've won the project now. You'd expect us then to move into project controls, and that's what we're working on right now, is how do we manage the return costs from these projects. We think that's critical because I think there's going to be a high degree of accountability on contractors going forward. If you were promised that your school, prison, hospital is the cheapest and the greenest, you're going to have to prove it at some point, and that means monthly submissions. So you'll be able to, in what platform can assist you in returning monthly costing carbon submissions. So Sterling is in that space. And then lastly will be about a whole bunch of analytics, because I told you how much data was in there. Wouldn't it be smart if the platform was able to give you benchmark data to tell you alternatives that could help you? We are well integrated with many other platforms, and what you see in green ticks there are those that we are linked in with today, and in orange those are our future plans. But back to my original point, we are very keen to be and remain an open source platform and play friendly with the rest of your systems within your organization. There's a whole host of really clever data within Sterling that we'd like you to benefit from. The data itself is secure and remains in the UK, which will be important for many of you who work on government or secure projects. We have support internationally as we're growing into the States and in Australia. We've got development teams over in Poland as well. So I'm coming to an end here, Jonathan, ready for some Q&A. I'm just going to prompt you for that. We've got a whole host of services as well that are designed to help you as you migrate from perhaps an existing system to a new one. So get in touch with us. We're well prepared to help you on that journey. But if I leave you with anything, it's that we're on the same journey, really. We want to help the industry to answer the burning questions of today. How much and how green is my new asset? Can I prove it? And goodness, this is a bit complex. How do we make it easy? Right, and our focus is on making life easy. So you've got a platform here which is really clean and consistent and modern. It's got multi-screen, multi-user capability. There's a whole lot of dragging and dropping in there rather than mapping around, so it just becomes quite intuitive as a system. Online platforms don't tend to have undo features. Ours does. It's got a full history to it, much like a finance system would. So we can see any transaction that happened by anyone at any time. We'll have simple user permissions in there to lock it down and make it super secure with two-factor authentication. And it's got some simple things in there like spell checks, Grammarly. Not all systems do that. I mean, it seems quite small, but we know from our users that these are important features. So that's where I've got to, really. Thanks very much for your attention and for listening. I guess the question is how will you prove and improve your footprint? So if you're struggling with that, get in touch.
Thanks, Alex. Does anyone have any questions? I've got a couple. Anyone?
I have a question, if you don't mind. So, I mean, our system is a kind of standardized system with standardized parts in each panel, for example. But depending on where our site was, we might choose to, I guess, make it in a different location. I think our eventual goal is that we'll have regional hubs, but it might mean, I guess, looking at each individual project on an individual basis and working out which suppliers are most local to the regional hubs. Could we, for example, use your system to kind of calculate the carbon cost of a single panel and then change it depending on each project we're working on? Is that something that we could do?
I'd say so, Tasha, and I think it's really helpful for you. For those that don't know, Tasha's got a modular off-site manufactured product. This is going to help contractors to prove that their procurement strategy is the smartest. You might be competing against another contractor for the same thing. Actually, it's your procurement strategy, where you're getting materials from, where you're going to build them. Your off-site manufacturing strategy could come into that, and using a platform like Sterling, you'll be able to demonstrate the granularity of those decisions, and it will be auditable and demonstrable that yours is greener. I think today we've got some very high-level benchmarking tools where you're trying to articulate that, and it's much harder to demonstrate that, but you'll be able to in a much more granular way.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
So my question is, so who's your client base then? Is it Contractor Focus, do you think, or is it? QSs in consultants? A bit of both. So in my head, I've got it that it works kind of like we would throw a model in there and then be able to understand the impact of our design decisions. Is that, well, obviously the contractor's probably going to leverage more of that than we would. So who do you see your client base as?
Well, I think when we first started this, I think we're competing against the likes of Cost OS and CostX and Candy and these platforms, maybe a bit of Assemble, other takeoff tools. And what we're finding is that we're doing, in many cases, more than these in one place. So we're looking at contractors and consultants who are playing in that space with those tools, saying, hey, this is a smarter, better integrated, more affordable solution. So yes, we're targeting contractors and consultants, but we've been quite surprised actually where we're dealing with clients who are trying to respond to the legal framework about how they have to have carbon assessments, how they have to have a glide path, and they need, in order to have a glide path and meet that, you kind of need to have the analytics and the data that tells you where is it that I'm burning the most. You can't improve what you don't measure, and I think for so long they've been using headline benchmarks that have told them how much they're burning, but not how to fix it. So we're being quite surprised by the client base that's coming to us, or consultants and management consultants that are advising those clients, saying, hey, actually, we could use this to manage a portfolio. So we're quite excited by that. We've also been approached by plenty of those in the oil and gas sector and in manufacturing, because it's, to Tasha's point, it's a way of demonstrating that your product is greener. And to do cost and carbon in one space is and demonstrate that and put those figures out on your website if you're a manufacturer, that's a bit of a USP. When designers are there today trying to select greener products or looking for alternatives. So perhaps you'd expect me to say everyone, but it's surprised us as well actually how broad the client base has become, and we're really excited by it.
Because one of the issues that majority of my work has always been kind of REBA 0 to 3, maybe 4. But I'll ask, Chris has got a question. I shall let him ask a question before I throw something else in there. Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Thanks. Really enjoyed that. Thank you. Really interesting. I'm chairing a working group on embodied carbon benchmarking measurement across framework procurement. So that's public sector framework providers. And the topic of discussion there is about, because we're working with contractors there, all of whom are attempting to better capture the data and better forecast, and we're introducing requirements for them to do so at the earliest stage in the project and then at pre-construction, post-construction. So we really want to demonstrate improvement across the life cycle of the project, and we're trying to do that consistently before we get to the point where the BCD database goes live, which is, Rick's keep telling us it's coming. I've not heard much on the timing yet. But I guess a lot of the conversations in our group go back to confidence in the data underpinning the products. And I guess it's relatively easy to say, well, I'm specifying this product, there's an EPD for it, so there we go, that's traceable. How does your system deal with the sort of authenticity of data, or the approach for different contractors where they're dealing with some of their other carbon sources, so their own construction process carbon, for example, transport carbon, because those areas are far less validated so far in terms of a sort of quality and consistent data. I just wonder whether by having a structure like you do, you're trying to bring people together in one way of telling you things, or at least having a way of inputting stuff consistently. Just wonder whether you've got anything in that space, because EPDs are a known quantity now. Everyone's pushing them, and that's a key driver. But some of those other areas of carbon in the 1 to 5 sphere, which I think are quite interesting in terms of what you're doing there and being able to put a whole picture together.
Yeah. I think you're right, and well, it's you're right to identify that that's a problem for sure. We're in an industry where we don't record data very well to learn from it in any case. It's only because of fines and legislation that we do so with health and safety, I think. It's going to be some time before we have the same kind of stats within the carbon space, but at least we now have a framework into which to put it. I think we need to talk a bit quite pragmatically here. It'd be really easy for us to get into an accounting space and say, well, you must put every single line in here. Our approach is we'd like to make it simpler so that they can put some maybe default values in that say, on average, things are going to come from within a 50k radius, right? And then certify to that or something like that. And then, but we've got to focus, I think, if we're going to hit these big targets, and they are big, let's not mess around in the weeds. Let's understand what the 80-20 rule says. And if that's carbon, steel and earthwork movements, then let's focus on those and get granularity there and demand that our contractors report more routinely and in a way that's auditable in those spaces. The rest of it, I'd just love them to get into a space where the behavioural change is there. They're starting to report carbon stats in the way they do their costs in order to get paid. I'm starting to see pain gain contracts talked about as well, where if you have a target cost and you come in over or under as a pain gain contract, which we all recognise, to incentivise. I can see the same thing happening with carbon, with pain gain carbon targets. But goodness me, if you come in under your carbon target and you get £500,000 rebate in your back pocket and you didn't get that carbon right, that becomes carbon fraud. And whether that's with good intent or not, right? I'm not suggesting they're all naughty, but I'm being a contractor myself. But I think the whole area of carbon auditing and misreporting is going to become quite serious. So if I were an MD in that space, I'd want greater controls and the whole thing systemized and auditable.
Just conscious of time, I think we've got time for one more quick question from Rod.
Thank you. Good evening, Alex. I've got one question on, at the start of this conversation, you mentioned you're part of a founding partnership with Xero. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what are the strategic synergies between Sterling Rapid DCS and Xero, and what are the synergies that the two organizations can leverage from?
Sure. Okay. Well, it was a fairly easy conversation because we were chatting about it. The pair of us, we've known Jonathan through WSP for some time, but we chatted about this and said we've got such a common overlap here that we want to help the industry, but you can't do that alone. I can't do that just as a software provider. We need to generate conversation and change, and we need to network better. There are groups that talk at a policy level that we could attempt to leverage, but actually we're really excited to deal with the grassroots where action is actually taking place and we can actually support that. I think there's lots of really great chat in that space, but it's complex. We're in the business of trying to make that easier. But there's a lot of synergies. It makes complete sense for us to work together.
I'll second all those points that Alex has just raised. The alignment between the two groups is quite strong. But anyway, conscious of time, don't want to keep everyone longer than expected. Thanks very much, Alex. Feel free to continue to chat on one of the many other channels. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.